What's up, Guiding Bolt fans? Jessica here, and today I want to talk about homebrew rule ideas for incorporating into your 5e games. Now, our table doesn't use all 27 of these homebrew rules, but I thought it would be fun to gather up a whole bunch of ideas for you to consider at your table. Sometimes we may not like a rule as written, or we just want an alternative option. So let's jump in. Number one is inspiration point buys. So players can have up to 5 points of inspiration instead of the normal single one. They can spend 1 point of inspiration to allow them to roll with advantage, like normal, or they can spend 3 points of inspiration, which allows them to re-roll the dice. Unlike with advantage, this option allows the player to see the results of the die roll before choosing to roll again or not. Finally, spending 5 points of inspiration is an automatic success. Number two, alternatively to the inspiration point buy alternative, inspiration is just a reroll rather than advantage. Number three, Nat 20s on initiative gives a player advantage on their first attack, while a Nat 1 on initiative gives a player disadvantage on their first attack. Number four, everyone rolls an initiative check at the start of a session and after each long rest. So this way, everyone knows when it's their turn to go, and it doesn't break the flow of the story when combat starts. Number five, drinking a potion is allowed as a bonus action rather than the use a magic option action. And this is actually one of the homebrew rules that we use at our table right now. Number six, instead of number five, you can have it where if you use your main action to use a healing potion, it does max healing, while using a healing potion as a bonus action results in the normal die roll. Number seven, players commit to an action as soon as they roll for it. The player should only roll when the DM tells them to, and they must accept the result even if they don't like it. If nothing else, this homebrew rule makes players consider their actions a lot more seriously. Number 8. Instead of dealing double damage dice, critical hits are normal damage plus max dice value plus the modifier. So for example, if your hit normally does 2d4 points of damage plus 3 for your modifier, on a critical hit, you would still roll the 2d4, but you would add the max of the dice, which would be 8, plus your 3 modifier. Alternatively, on number 9 for critical hits, you roll double the damage dice and keep the highest half. So for example, a longsword critical hit would be 2d8, so you roll 4d8 and keep the 2 highest dice. Number 10. Crits on ability checks give you an additional +5 to the roll. Number 11. Only use DCs when it comes to spell saves or saving throws. Outside of combat, skill checks are yes, maybe, or no DCs. So a high roll would be a success, a low roll would be a failure, and a mid-range roll would, be a maybe. For example, if you were rolling for insight versus deception, a high roll would mean the person sees through the lie. A mid-range roll would mean they're suspicious, but not quite certain, while a low roll means maybe they believe the lie or they take it at face value. Number 12, advantage on an HP roll when you gain a level. Number 13, this is the luck roll. So this is used as a way of helping a DM decide on things that they hadn't considered beforehand. So the DM decides what they think the likelihood of something succeeding is, 10%, 20%, and then they ask the players high or low. Then the DM rolls a d20 or they choose to have the player do so. So an example would be the player says their large fighter and plate mail wants to jump from a third-story window to the lower roof of the next door building. The DM decides, there's probably a 20% chance he's going to crash straight through that roof, and a few of the other PCs will have to make dex saving throws to not fall through with them. So he has his player call high, which would be the 16 to 20 range, 20%, or low, 1 to 5. If the die roll comes up within the called range, then the fighter falls through the roof. Any other die roll would result in a success though. 14. If you take longer than 20 to 30 seconds to decide on what you're doing during combat, then your character was distracted and lost their turn. Or alternatively, they readied a dodge. So this helps ensures that players are paying attention and the party is always thinking what to do next. I think a good exception here would be when the DM throws something thematic into the combat, and sometimes that may cause the player's perfect plan to get turned upside down, and they may need a second to think about a new plan, and that's okay here. Number 15. Which bolt does its full damage every round you maintain concentration on it after the turn is cast? So I know this one is pretty specific to a spell, but there are lots of different homebrew rules you could have around spells. 16. The DM will repeat what players get for loot as many times as they need to when distributing it, but the moment the game moves on, if the players forgot to write it down and can't remember it, then that loot is lost to the void. 17. If a player fails to take notes that their character doesn't remember, the DM will allow a straight intelligence check, especially if it's plot related, and will give hints on what it is depending on the role and what they're trying to remember. And this can actually help greatly with all the members taking notes throughout the session. And if you're having problems with this at your game table, this is probably a good thing you just want to have an out-of-game conversation about. Players should be taking notes to help them remember what's going on, and it can be frustrating for the DM when players aren't doing their part of this, but it needs to be clear that that's an expectation. So talk to your table about it if this is a problem. Number 18. Shields can be splintered. A defender may choose to sacrifice or destroy their shield to make an attack miss. Magic shields are permanently reduced by a plus each time until they're destroyed. Number 19. Taking max HP when leveling and not rolling at all. Number 20. When a character drops to 0 hit points and they make at least one death saving throw before they are healed by whatever means, they will suffer 1 point of exhaustion until they can take a long rest, even if they were fully healed through magical means. This exhaustion can only be relieved by a long rest or whatever cleric spells apply. This effect will stack if this occurs more than once before the exhaustion can be relieved. Number 21. Sleeping enemies can be killed instantly with proper stealth. And I personally like this one because just because something isn't written into the rules doesn't mean it wouldn't make sense in a realistic sort of way in the world. So I'm all for number 21. If you have the two-weapon fighting style, the extra attack feature also affects your offhand attacks. However, in any round where you wield an offhand weapon and don't attack with it, you gain +1 to your AC until the start of your next turn. Number 23. When a player calls shots on an attack, let them do so, but adjust the AC accordingly. If they call to hit a limb, whether a leg, arm, tentacle, then it's the AC +10. If they call to hit the head, it's AC +20. And if they're trying to shoot out the eye, it's AC +30. Number 24. Players may exchange their move action for a second attack action. But remember, as a rule, any rulings the players can use can also be used by the bad guys. But this homebrew rule allows for faster and more unique combat, especially when a mob with multi-attack stands in front of the players. Number 25. Turn inspiration into luck points. So this is a little bit different from our inspiration discussion a few slides back. So in this instance, luck points are acquired in the same way as inspiration normally is, but players can have up to 20 of them. Players can then spend their luck points to alter a die roll. So they can spend single points of luck to increase their own die roll by 1. So each one spent equals an increase on the die. And every 2 points they spend can decrease their own die roll by 1, or increase or decrease the value of another player's or the DM's die by 1. Players can't spend their way into a critical hit, but they can turn a hit into a miss or a failed skill check into a pass. Number 26. Players don't roll death saves. The DM rolls, and players don't get to know the results. Having a rule like this gives combat a bigger sense of urgency, I think. Test it out, see what happens at your table. And number 27. If you miss with a spell that requires an attack roll, you can avoid wasting the spell slot by making it a concentration spell until it hits. If you lose concentration before your next turn, or don't immediately try the spell again on your next turn, then you lose the spell slot. Alright guys, that does it for today's video. Thanks for stopping by to watch. If you have homebrew rules that you use at your table, I'd love to hear them, so go ahead and share down below in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And until next time, may the dice odds be in your favor.